Hi everybody, welcome to our next block of the month in which we're going to be making this gorgeous quilt behind me. We really want to thank Heather over at the Sewing Loft for these great patterns. These patterns are really neat. They come in these little folders, and included are patterns for 12-inch blocks or 6-inch blocks. And they're individual patterns that sell for $5. And as you can see, we've used a whole bunch of them to make this gorgeous quilt, and that is what we're going to be doing together from now until April of 2026. This is month 1, and in this month we're going to be making the patchwork tree and the birdhouse. And I don't know if you can see because they're down lower, but we're going to be making 3 of the trees and 2 of the birdhouses. The birdhouses are the 6-inch size, and the patchwork trees are the 12-inch size. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to need. You're going to need all your basic sewing equipment. You're going to need a machine with a great 1/4-inch foot. If you have a scant 1/4-inch foot, that's really going to be your friend over the next several months. You're going to need your rotary cutter, your cutting ruler, and your cutting mat. You're going to need an iron and a pressing mat. And then these are some, you're also going to need the corner pop ruler from Studio 180 if you're going to use our directions for the blocks, because we are going to modify them to use the corner pop ruler, and this will give you more accurate results. Okay, if you use that, you're going to want some Invisigrip to put on the back of your corner pop ruler because they are not non-stick, and this will help stop your ruler from slipping. And then a couple of other things that I have found incredibly helpful are the fabric folding pen. I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a second. And I've also been using these Pattern Pals, and this is called a Clip Caddy, and this you can make yourself. We have patterns in the shop. We can't currently find them, but we are going to solve that problem today, I hope. And we have these Pattern Pal stickers, and what you do with the stickers are they have letters and numbers on them, and you put them on your Wonder Clips, and then you can use them to label your squares. So I've done that with all my squares for the month. So you can see here that they are, the numbers are, these are the letters. Jake is our videographer today, and have you zoomed in? I can't tell from, thank you. Okay. So you can see that there are letters on your Wonder Clips. Those are from these stickers. And then you can use those to label your pieces. This first month, there's not a ton of pieces, but as we get going, there's months we get up to, I know T, and I actually think W. So this is going to become more and more helpful as you go along. And we have Wonder Clips and these helpful stickers for sale in the shop. That's just something else that I have found incredibly helpful while I was making all of my squares. So let's get started by talking about what's in your kit. Every month you're going to come in and pick up your kit, and inside there will be 2 patterns, and then there's going to be fabric. This month there's a whole stack of greens and browns, and you will also get cutting directions, because she just tells you in there what pieces you need to cut and what size, but we've given you strips in that to cut from. If we have given you exact sizes so that you don't need to straighten an edge, then that will be noted on the cutting directions. Okay, so this month all of these strips are exactly 2.5 inches. And so we've told you in the cutting directions, you don't need to straighten this edge. You're going to cut your pieces directly from these without worrying about having to make it exactly 2.5 inches. They're already cut for you. So for your tree, we're going to start this video. We're going to make the tree first because it is slightly easier. You're going to need your background fabric, and this is sort of a creamy white, and it's got a little bit of green grunge on it. You're going to need your 4 strips of green, and you're going to pick 3 browns. This green with the yellow dots, your black piece, and this narrower brown piece you're going to put away with your birdhouse, and you're not going to touch those right now. These strips are all wider. They all measure 3 inches, not 3.5. These all measure 3 inches. And you can pick 3 of these, and they are going to be the trunks and the base on your tree, okay? So each tree has a different brown. And then, this one's down here. And then you're going to put the 4th brown away, and you can do it, if you want to do it exactly like I did, you'll take this solid brown and put this one away and save it for your birdhouse. But again, you have plenty of fabric here. You can make your own decision, okay? There's going to be a little bit of picking and choosing along the way. But this is what you're going to need to make your trees, okay? Your background fabric, your green strips, your brown strips, and your pattern, and your cutting directions. This month only, I'm going to walk you through cutting. I'm not actually going to cut because this is someone's kit and I have my pieces pre-cut, but I'm going to explain to you exactly what you should do at each step of the cutting, okay? If you are used to our Block of the Month program, we have a lot of new people this time, but if you're used to our Block of the Month program, you can skip through this cutting part and get to the tips and tricks for constructing the block. But if you are new, I am going to now walk you exactly through cutting, okay? Okay, so in your tree blocks, we're going to go back and forth here between the cutting directions and the fabric. Okay, so you're going to take each of your green 2.5-inch strips, and you're going to cut from each one of them, you're going to cut 3 pieces that measure 2.5 by 12.5, okay? Because you're going to be making 3 trees. So when you're done, you're going to have 3 dark pieces, 3 medium pieces, 3 light yellow, this yellowish green pieces, and 3 of this other medium, okay? And the way you're going to do that is like this. I'm going to take these out of the way. When you go to cut them, what you're going to do is you're going to take your 2.5-inch strip, and you're going to cut your selvage off, okay? So you're going to make sure that that your piece is straight. And what that means here is I've got one straight edge running along a line on the ruler and another straight edge running along the line of the ruler. If it looks like this, you're doing it wrong, okay? It can't be at an angle. If it looks like this, you're doing it wrong. And if it looks like this, where it's funky in the middle, it's off in the middle and okay on the ends, that's not okay either. If any of those things happen, what you want to do is take your strip and hit it with a steam iron and then bring it back to your table, okay, to your cutting surface. You need a 90-degree angle here. So we're going to cut this selvage off and we're going to make sure we have a nice straight lines, okay, and cut your selvage off. Then you're going to measure 12.5 inches. And you can do that under your ruler. You're going to take your ruler, you're going to turn it sideways, you're going to lay your strip out, and you're going to find the 12.5-inch line on your ruler. That's all the way down here, 12.5, okay? And that's where that straight edge is going to go. And then again, we're going to make sure that our piece is straight on a straight line here and a straight line here the entire way down. That's how we start from the beginning, making sure that everything is square and exact and ready to go. And accuracy matters with these blocks, okay? So we're going to cut a 2.5 by 12.5-inch piece, and you're going to cut 2 more of those out of your strip, okay? So that you've got 3 of each color. And we're going to set those aside. Then we're going to move on to our browns, okay? And I've chosen these 3 browns, and each of these are 3 inches wide. So from each of these browns, you're going to cut, oh, I found a typo in my directions. I have to fix that. You're going to cut 1 rectangle that's 1.5 by 4.5, and 1 square that's 2.25 by 2.25. So what that means is you'll take your selvage off the same way we just did, and you're going to cut down 4.5 inches, okay? And then you'll trim that to be 1.5 inches wide. And that will be piece B. And you'll label it piece B and set it aside. And then you're going to cut a 2 1/4 inch square. So from the piece that's left, you'll cut off a 2 1/4 inch piece, and then you'll trim it this way so you have a perfect 2 1/4 inch square, okay? And you're going to do that from 3 browns, from each one of them. So you'll have 3 piece Bs, 3 piece Cs, and that's it from the browns, okay? Then you're going to grab your background fabric. Your background fabric is just a large cut of fabric. So the first thing you're going to do, because look it's been in my bag for a while here, the first thing you're going to do is press it. Use steam, because steam will pre-shrink your fabric, so that is a good thing. So press it with steam, shrink it up, press the center fold out, okay? Because those folds aren't accurate. They're just there from being wound onto the bolt. If you ever saw the machine that winds fabric on bolts, you'd understand why fabric is so wonky sometimes. Then you're going to fold your fabric with your selvage ends together. You're going to lay it on your cutting mat, and you're going to straighten an edge. So you want your selvages to come together exactly, and then you're going to straighten an edge. So you're going to take your ruler and lay it on here. You can use the selvages, or you can use your fold at that point, because again, that's been straightened out. And you would just want to make sure you're taking a little bit off the entire length of the fabric. Okay, that's the way to straighten it. Then what you'll do is you'll turn your fabric around, or you can turn your mat around, which is a really good idea, but I don't have a whole lot of space. And you're going to measure over 4 1/4 and cut a strip. And then you'll move that to the edge of your mat, and you're going to measure to the 7-inch line on your mat and cut off a strip that's 7 inches. So you have a 4 1/4 inch strip and a 7-inch strip. Okay, then you'll follow your cutting directions for your background, and for the tree you need 6 pieces cut 4 1/2 by 6, and you'll cut those out of your 7-inch strip, and out of your 4 1/4 inch strip you're going to cut 3 squares that are 4 1/4 and 3 squares that are 3 1/4. Then you'll take those 2 strips, put them aside for your birdhouse block, okay, because you'll need those again for your birdhouse block. All right, so at that point, you should have all of these pieces cut. We should have A's. I lost my A clip already. Here it is. Have a bunch of A pieces. Should have some B's, C's, D, E, and F, okay? And that's what we're going to use to construct our tree. Your directions are also going to tell you to write on your pattern. In step 2, you're going to write your E trim lines are 3 inches, your D trim lines are 2 inches, and in step 3 you want to write that your trim lines are 1 inch, okay? You want to make those notes for yourself. That's going to be useful for the corner pop ruler here in just a minute, and you're going to need those. You'll want to not have to be switching back and forth between your patterns. So once you write those on there, you can be done with your cutting directions. You can fold them up and put them back in your bag with your birdhouse block or wherever you're keeping it, and we can move on to sewing, okay? So at this point, we're going to be working with our sewing machine, our pattern, and our corner pop ruler, which is really exciting. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, actually, Jake, before you move, the first thing we're going to do is sew our A strips together. And I did all of mine the same in my original quilt. I did them in sort of an ombre gradient thing. But I think I'm going to see how they look a little bit mixed up today, and you guys are welcome to do the same thing. You can do your trees however you want. But you're just going to start by sewing these 4 strips together, okay? You're going to use a scant 1/4 inch seam, and you're going to, you can use any cream or you can use Dove Gray thread. You can use white. You can use green if you want, but for most of the quilt, I just used a Dove Gray. Today I do have a creamy thread in here, but it wouldn't matter. Either one is just fine. Okay, so I've got my sewing machine set up for a scant quarter. For those of you with Janome machines, you want to be at a 1.8 stitch length, and you want, I have on my HP foot. The needle is going through the center of the HP foot, and I'm just sewing as close to the edge as I can. I'm going to make sure these blocks, they require a lot of accuracy. So you want your raw edges exactly together. And what I often do with long strips is I make sure my edges are together for a certain length, and I put my finger on it and I sew to my finger, but not over my finger because that would hurt. Okay, so I've got a nice scant 1/4 inch seam. I managed to forget my snips, and we got a new spot we're sewing in, so I'm just going to have to do without them for a while. And now I'm going to add the next strip, and I'm going to sew with my bigger piece on the bottom and my strip on the top. Got my raw edges exactly together. And you'll see I've got my finger here because I know that's as far as my edges are exactly together, and then I stop and adjust. Somebody was just commenting in class the other day that my mom doesn't sew very fast, and that was one of the first things I learned when I decided I really wanted to get better and become a more accurate sewer. That was the first thing I found helped me a lot, was slowing down. Okay, got another one. And then I'm going to add my last strip, and then I'm going to show you how to press these guys. This strip came out of my stash. It's been around a while, and it's got a lot of threads hanging off the end here. That makes it a little harder to... The other thing is, sometimes there's a tendency to want to pull to line your strips up. And if you pull on them, you can distort them, and that can cause problems too. So you just want your fabric, you want to let it lay the way it wants to lay. If you're pulling at it too much, that means you didn't cut it. It's not cut right, okay? If you have to pull to get it to get your raw edges to match up. And a clue that you would be pulling is if you get to the bottom and one strip is a little bit longer than the other. All right, time for one of my favorite inventions of all time, this fabric folding pen. I think this guy is really great. I think he's a really neat invention. Those of you who've done our blocks of the month before have heard me sing this thing's praises before, but this helps a lot. I'll be honest, I don't need it as much as I used to. My skills have improved, but again, it helps you get really good results, can really make a difference. Okay, so on your cutting directions, it tells you that all of your seams should be pressed down. So what they're saying is they're all going to get pressed towards the trunk. So whatever side of your fabric piece is down, and this one's mine. This is my bottom of my trunk, where my trunk is going to go. So that's where I'm going to press everything towards that strip. And here is my fabric folding pen. This little guy comes in a package like this, and it's this pen and this little bottle of liquid. We don't know what's in the little bottle of liquid. I suspect it's unicorn tears. I don't know that for sure. But what you do is you fill your folding pen up with water to here, and then you take your little bottle of magic. You gotta, here, you have to unscrew the lid, but mine's really full. But you would unscrew the lid and fill the little blue thing up to here. And then you add 5 drops of magic, okay? Screw the lid back on, and then you shake it up a little bit so that you mix the magic into all the water. And then here's the most important thing. You get a cup and you store it like this. This thing has a fatal flaw, and that is if you store it this way, the lid fills up with water. I don't know why. And if it runs out of space in the lid, then it leaks out. So if you forget and you store it this way and it's in a cup, now you've caught all your liquid. But the thing is, you want to store it standing up with the top of the pen in the air. Okay, so that's how you use it. That's how you store it and set it up. Here's how you use it. All I'm going to do is take my pen and I'm going to run it along my seam line. And you can tell that it's working because the fabric is changing color, which means it's wet. Now watch. When I take my iron and I press it this way, these puppies stay so nice and flat, okay? Where when I do this way, when I take this one, a lot of times they want to stick back up. And so the other thing is you can press it that way first and then come back at it with your folding pen. And if you have to, you can squeeze a little bit right here to get some more liquid to come out. But you take your, see? Watch this. Bam, it lays down. So you'll see me use this a lot. I really like this thing. I think it's really great. You should also use steam. Steam is your friend. Steam makes everything even hotter. And then turn your piece over and press everything again. And I'm also pushing, okay? You can't see that, but I'm actually pushing. And then you should have a nice flat piece of fabric, which is what you want because now we're going to use our corner pop ruler. Okay, corner pop rulers have 2 parts. They have the cutaway section on this side of the ruler. You can see there it says cutaway corners. And this section is half and whole measurements, and this half is 1/4 and 3/4 measurements. Okay, so that's cutaway. And then this side is trim down. Okay, corner trim down. So you're going to use that in a second. First, you're going to use your cutaway corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check. And I wrote on step 2, E trim lines are 3-inch and D trim lines are 2-inch. So that means where I add my D, which is at the top of the tree, I'm going to use my 2-inch lines, and where I trim for E, which is at the bottom of the tree where the trunk goes, I'm going to use 3. So I'm going to set this right here for a cheat sheet. And I'm going to, again, my trunk is going down here, okay? So those, I'm going to start here at the top, which are my D trim lines, which are 2 inches. So I take my corner pop ruler, and I'm going to lay it on here. Let's see if I can do it this way so you guys can see better. I've got this line, it says 2 on it. I've got this line exactly along my green, this edge, and this line exactly along the other edge of my green fabric. Again, this is not okay, this is not okay, wonky is not okay. We want it to be as close to perfect as we can get it, okay? Once I've done that, I'm going to put pressure on it and cut, okay? So cut away my corner. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, I'm doing piece D, 2-inch trim line. So there's my 2-inch line. The other corner is right along here. And cut away. These triangles you don't need. Okay, so get rid of them. Then you're going to grab piece D, which is a square. And now this square was cut slightly larger than our pattern said. This square was cut 3 1/4. And now what I'm going to do is cut it in half. Okay, I just laid my ruler corner to corner. So now I have 2 triangles instead of 1 square. And now I'm going to sew these on. To sew these on, I'm going to lay my triangle on the bottom and my piece on the top, because I want to see that I've got approximately equal triangles sticking out the edges. Okay, so again, something like this we don't want. We want it to be approximately equal, and you want your raw edges to lay exactly together. And then we're going to take it to the machine. You can pin if you want to, but I don't usually. And we're going to be very careful that we sew this together without pulling or distorting in any way, because we have 2 bias edges. So I'm doing my best to let the fabric lay the way it needs to. I'm just guiding it through so I get a perfect quarter, as perfect a 1/4 inch as I can get. Okay, and then I'm going to sew the other one on the other side. Again, equal triangles on both sides. Okay, and now we're going to press, and we're going to press these guys open. Sorry, I'm knocking stuff over. I'm going to press these open. Put this back on my, losing all my letters here. And I know the pattern is going to tell you to press one direction or another, but it is so much easier to do the next trim down on your corner pop if you press these open. And I'm going to press from both sides. Get it as flat as you can. You can grab your folding pen if you want to. Okay, once we've done that, we're going to go back to our corner pop, and now we're going to use the trim down lines. So what we're going to do is lay it on our fabric. I've got the seam I just made on the 2-inch line, and I'm going to line up my raw edge of my block here and here, okay? And my 2-inch line here. And then once I've done that, you just cut away those extra, anything sticking off, okay? Same thing over here. My 2-inch line on my seam, the edge of the ruler along my greens. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go in front of you there. Okay. Okay, so we did that for piece D. Now for piece E, we're going to use the 3-inch trim lines. So let's see how we can do this so you guys can get the best view. This one is really fun because you cut across 2 different, you're going to cut across this seam you made right here. Okay, so I've got it lined up with my 3-inch line. And I'm going to have to put my arm in front of you real quick, I'm sorry. Okay, and then the same thing on the other side. the Invisigrip can make it hard. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now I've got my piece E. I'm gonna find piece E here. It's a square. This guy got wrinkled, so I'm just gonna straighten him out. And then I'm gonna cut him in half, just the way we did. So one advantage to the corner pop ruler is people often say, well, I need more fabric because I am cutting my squares bigger, which is true, except that you usually don't need more fabric because she would tell you to cut 2 of these squares and lay them on and sew them on, and we don't end up doing that. So we need half as many squares. So we only need 1 square instead of 2. So same process as before. Our triangles on either side should be approximately equal. We put this under the machine, raw edges perfectly together. And then, again, try to do this without pulling, because they're bias edges. Was it supposed to rain today? No? Sounds like it's raining outside. Okay, raw edges together, equal triangles. And here we go. Okay. Press this open. And again, remember, you can always, I gotta add water. You can always repress. If your seams are pressed open and later on you think, you know, it would really be better if they were pressed one direction or the other, you can always press them that direction later on. It's really not a big deal. This guy's not laying the way I want him to. Okay. Can even do it from this side if you see an issue. Okay. Whoop! Okay. Got those pressed. Now I gotta trim. So now we're using the 3-inch trim line, which if you're like, oh yeah, 2-inch, and you put the 2-inch on there and you're like, wait, something's really, really wrong. Go check your directions. You're supposed to be on 3-inch trim line. Lined up here and here. Same thing again, other corner. Okay, so there's my tree. The bigger ones, the bigger triangles are on the bottom towards the trunk. And now we have to construct the trunk. So now we're on step 3. And step 3 uses pieces C and F. So we've got 2 piece F. And we're using them this way. And she's telling you to put piece C on opposite corners. So she's saying this corner and this corner. Okay, and again, this is an opportunity to use corner pop, and we're going to use our 1-inch trim lines. So, if you think, uh-oh, how am I going to remember which corners? Grab a friction pen and just mark. This is, okay, just mark your corners that you're going to cut off, okay? That'll save you a lot of aggravation in the future. And again, we're going to use our 1-inch trim line. So, set this guy over here for a minute. 1 inch, lined up, cut off, and then find our mark. We're going to take off this corner, the 1-inch trim line, and then we got to cut our square in half, corner to corner. Okay, and we're going to sew those onto the corners we cut off. Second guy, same way. I always put the triangle on the bottom. Equal triangles. Perfectly matched up raw edges. We're going to press them flat and trim them down. Everybody wants pressing to be a really quick, fast step. And the truth is, with quilting, if you want to do a good job, the #1 piece of advice is slow down. Slow down and do a really good job. Okay? I always press from both sides. I don't know what that guy's doing there. And 1-inch trim line. So line up our edges, line up our seam line. Same thing again. Line up our edges, line up our seam line. Seam line on the diagonal. Edges on our edges. Okay. And now we add the trunk. So now all we're going to do to finish up is sew these two guys together and then sew this piece onto our treetop. Okay? Well, I don't know what's happening. I'm going to press this now because it's not lining up right, which means either I pressed, it looks like I didn't, this guy wasn't 4.5, which I had 2 pieces sitting there and I bet you I grabbed the wrong one. I did. Okay, so good lesson there. I had 2 brown pieces sitting there. I grabbed what I thought was the right one, but clearly was not. So how do I know? Well, when I put this under here, my white piece is measuring 4.5 perfect, and my brown piece is sticking out. It should never be, oh gee, that piece is sticking out. I think I'll just cut it off. Make sure. So my white piece is the right length. My brown piece wasn't. So I'm going to trim my brown piece up and then sew the other one on. You want to make sure your raw edges are exactly together. I'm going to press this open, and then we're going to sew it onto our treetop. And then we'll have a finished block. How exciting. Okay, so treetop, or trunk, treetop, bigger pieces towards the trunk. These bigger triangles should be by your trunk. Let's spot check it, and yes, that's exactly the right length. So that's good. If you want to grab some pins, you can, but we're going to line up our raw edges. And I'll be real honest with you, when I know I'm doing a seam that's on the edge, and this one clearly is, it's the last seam in the block, I backstitch. So if I know I'm doing a seam on a block that isn't, and like this is my last seam, and I know it is, and I know I'm not going to touch this block for a while, say like 6 months till I sew them all together, I backstitch that last seam at the beginning and the end, just to give it a little bit, oops, sorry Jake, a little bit of insurance, so it doesn't start to pull out. So now I'm going to backstitch at the end, just a couple of stitches, and be done. And then, okay, seam looks good. And then we'll throw it on my cutting mat here. It should be 12.5 inches square. 12.5. Or maybe this is supposed to finish 12. Well, guys, Megan's having a moment here, so sorry about that. Either way, it's looking good. No, it should be 12.5. So there you go. Okay, there's your first block. That's how you do it. You want to make 3 trees. Okay, so you want to have 3 done. They can be identical, or you can rearrange your strips however you want to do them. But once you've got your trees finished, then come on back and we'll show you how to do the birdhouses. Good luck.